Great. Well, this is the last panel of the evening, so I'm just going to ask our panelists, in your answers, please be insightful, please be funny, and also please be brief, because all these folks want to get back to the drinking. So the topic of the evening for this panel is interoperability. Just to get started, I think it'd be helpful to maybe narrow the discussion because interoperability is a really big topic. So there's client-side interoperability, which is usually what we're talking about in this kind of a venue. And I guess just to start, and Neil, we can start with you. You can talk just a little bit about when that client-side interoperability is useful and when you wouldn't want to use it.
Sure, thanks, Mazy. Hi, I'm Neil from JP Morgan. Do very quick intros. It's not funny either, but that's fine. Or maybe it was. So I guess client-side interop, because we talked about this these sessions over the years, it's like super important for us. I guess a key driver has really been the cultural change and organizational change around to actually have people building applications that can talk to each other. Like you wind back 5 years, that never ever happened. We never had teams collaborating in any form actually really together. But now Interop actually enables us to break down these big monolithic apps, have people independently deploy things, and then have teams cross-pollinate and share context on those pieces. So there's loads of use cases for client-side interop. I guess for as things get mature and we end up in another space, we have trading use cases where a single user has multiple machines. Right? So how do you all of a sudden bridge that interop buses across multiple devices for that user? Then we end up with desktop to browser. Then we cross the channels and we go from desktop to mobile. Like how do you do that across external connectivity and everything else? So getting out of client like interop and into other spaces, I think is really what I'm doing next. So.
Yeah. Sounds good. Johan, how about you? What are some things you would not want to use client-side interoperability for?
Yes, I would say that it's not a technology. It's not something you should use to replace anything. It's about workflow. It's about making it easier. Just as Neil said, move from one application to another, pass context from one application to another, but not replacing things that you already have. Saving data onto a server. You don't need to go from one application, interop, to a third application and then save it. You already have tools server side to save information. And also extreme data processing, I think, is maybe not also the best solution to use interop for, because there are too much information being passed around, and sometimes when it's a trade flow, you might need to rewind it and see what actually happens. And if it's just passing onto the desktop, that might not be captured enough. So, as we have heard with lots of things earlier today, sort of make sure you use it when needed and not just because it's a new technology, because it's exciting.
Yeah. Borre, how about you?
Well, I think they answered really well. In terms of moving large data sets, obviously it doesn't really make any sense. You want to make those small tasks very quick and easy to make, passing the context, as I said. I think when it comes to things like cross-device, for example, it's important that we have capabilities of interoperability to support that complementary data flow as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I will just add, because somebody suggested that they wanted to do this, which is to replace Fix with FTC3. Please do not do that. That's not a good idea. Okay, just a percentage. So we're talking about automating, the workflows that could be automated. If you just had to make up a percent with your purview, what percent of current kind of work or workflows do you think are currently being automated? Any number from 0 to 100 will do.
I think it's definitely below 50. I think if you look at the number of people working on manual tasks in finance, I think that will give you an estimate.
Johan?
I would even go so low and say 25%, because many of the interop workflows that you think you have are not standardized. So you can't replace one application with another application because the interop has been built between a bilateral or with the bilateral agreement between the applications.
Yeah.
So when you rip one out, you no longer have interop. So
Yeah.
low.
I'm going to follow the trend, I think, and go for 15%.
Yeah.
I think it's like Interop's been like this is two parts. There's like what workflows is Interop enable. Then there's automation. They're almost two separate pieces. I think from a Interop point of view, I think we've got simplistic things done. But like have we really broken the barriers into there's some cross-functional linkage between the trading and operations? No. Have we really got to the point where like we're using it for like real critical business flows? In some cases, yes. In many cases, no. So I think the maturity of the organisations are at the point now where they understand the capability, but have we achieved anything with it? I think there's a lot more to go. In terms of automation, I think that's a open-ended question. Like there's a lot more that we can automate, but I think starting with understanding what can be done and capabilities, I think is really important. And I think we're only at that point now, really.
Yeah, sounds good. I want to turn to interop with third-party apps, right? One of the things that I think is the most exciting with FDC3 is that it's an industry standard, right? Which means you have internal apps interop with external. You didn't need an industry standard to have JP Morgan apps interop with other JP Morgan apps, right? You could have had your own standard. So the standard is there, but there still are challenges in getting internal apps talking to external apps. Security, for example, is one. But just starting with you, Neil, can you talk a little bit about whenever you're interoping with third-party applications at JP Morgan, what are some of the key issues that you're running into?
Yeah, so I think you hit on a few that I'll start with. I think security is really important. For us building internal tools and just assuming that we're only dealing with internal tools, internal users, many shortcuts can be taken. But as soon as you end up bringing an external vendor app into that ecosystem, data segregation becomes important, authentication becomes important, knowing identity, who the people are, controlling what crosses an internal interop space. I've just made that up, but an area into something that can talk to third-party apps is important. So I think there's a lot more complexity there that I guess in many cases will be shortcut. I think FTC3 as a standard will help enable some of those things, but I think there's almost the next level of how do you know who the users are? How do you trust both ends to that? There's a lot more to it. I think that will come.
Yeah. Johan, you're wearing an OpenFin hat nowadays, but you also had to deal with this as a third-party vendor at FactSet before. So, what are some of the challenges you ran into?
Yes, and I also have my FTC3 maintainer.
That's right.
Hat.
You got an FTC maintainer.
So I can talk from all aspects. No, I mean the real challenge is, as sort of Neil say, the sort of knowing which applications or which users even are available or are actually seeing the data that you're sending across. And I think not having that ready out of the box as it is today has led to people not in a way daring to adopt the standard data format, because people would then say, oh, that means anybody can understand my portfolios and see all my data. So the uptake of real standard FTC3 messaging has been delayed due to the lack of security between applications. From sort of my old days as a data vendor, it was hugely sort of important to be able to have a single standard output to clients so that they could easily ingest the data into any of their applications, regardless of what they were intending to use the data for. If it was to store it in their own databases, yes, of course, it can be in any format. But if they actually want to lift that up to their desktop and allow them to interoperate with a third party, then it needs to be in a format that, in order to provide a good quality data set, that they don't have to sort of format when they're sending it out.
Yeah. Borre, you're responsible for Icon and Refinitiv Workspace. You must deal with these kinds of challenges all the time. What are you finding to be the most difficult?
I think, as Johan said, the uptake of the standard is pretty low. We've implemented FTC3 for quite a while. Obviously, somewhat limited in the initial version. I think 2.0 is showing good promises. But at the end of the day, it's like these type of concepts have been around for a long time. I think it's more about us as data providers and consumers, we need to be much more open. We need to open up our ecosystem. We need to provide capabilities that people desire. A little bit like Gavin was saying earlier. It's all about like what kind of experience you're trying to provide, and do people want to have it? And the services have to provide value. And if we all provide value-add services, we're open, of course people will use it and they will integrate them. I think most of, or at least a large number of our clients have capabilities where they could leverage FTC3. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. Even if you wanted to, you could implement it yourself. You don't have to choose an OpenFin, but obviously that's working well for a lot of people. I think we just need to kind of, as an industry, want a little bit more openness. Yeah. And I think we should challenge ourselves. It's like, why do we all have to implement the same things over and over again? It's like, if you take a JP Morgan, I'm pretty sure most of the functionality they provide are provided by other people in the same banking space. And maybe you should buy services from data providers instead who are providing open solutions.
Yeah. Okay. my next question has absolutely nothing to do with interoperability, but I'm curious. So in 6 months' time, will Twitter share price be up or down?
I think we'll be up.
Okay.
6 months. It will be down.
Down, yeah.
Okay. Can we audience poll down? Raise your hands. Okay. And up. Wow, so it's fairly evenly split. I think a little bit more down, but all right. So we've got that resolved. And go short that stock. All right. So there's a lot of focus on desktop when it comes to Interop. We talked a little bit about mobile, but can we talk about what kind of the most interesting opportunities are when it comes to Interop between mobile and desktop? Neil, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can do. So I guess for us, I guess mobile covers a couple of different dimensions. Like one is obviously some like super high quality like native applications that we give out to employees and clients, and others are like more sort of adaptive, responsive web apps that we run on a mobile device. And getting the business to think about what you should do on mobile and not like, can I just run this exact application on mobile? Like getting them over that hurdle was step number one. I wouldn't suggest that we're there fully, but that's we're on that journey. Then we can get them thinking about, all right, if you're now on a mobile device and that's a phone or a tablet, and you're coming into the office or you've been to a meeting and you're coming back, like what are useful workflows that will allow you to like interact with your broader desktop? And then you're into things like, you've got some notifications, some exceptions, you're looking at some news or some commentary or some risk summaries, and then you can on your tablet or your phone, and you can get back to your desktop and share that context with what's there, and vice versa. And we're starting to get the business product folks to think about those dimensions, and that's like incredibly powerful. Then you're really focusing on like value add between devices, and that's we've never had that before. It's always been like, can I do this specific thing on mobile for this one use case? And now we're thinking, how can it really work in this ecosystem? There's a lot of infrastructure needed to make that work. Obviously, for us, we're going on a mobile device, you're going from an external network into your internal network. Again, all the same problems. It gets very complicated. But once you've done that, you enable some really, really interesting workflows.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit on the sort of developer side, that you should be able to build once and deploy everywhere, or at least deploy to your own mobile container, if we call it that. So by using an interoperability standard, you should be able to do that and leverage the same capabilities that you have on the desktop. Obviously, the user experience will be different, the sort of screen size will be different, but the capability should be the same. And then it would just be a, so we say, simple matter of sort of connecting the mobile devices to another machine, whether it's mobile or if it's another PC or another Mac on your sort of corporate network. That becomes a technical challenge that people much more intelligent than I can sort out. But giving everybody this opportunity that the development environment and interoperability environment is the same, regardless of if it's a device or a desktop. I think that's sort of the challenge that I can solve, or I can try to solve.
Borre?
I think it's very much just a user journey specific differentiation. I think if we look at our clients, a lot of the stuff we provide would be dependent on sometimes being on the desktop, sometimes being on a device, and I think providing that continuation is important. And it goes back to the points the user experience group was providing earlier. It's the same thing again. It's like you need to kind of solve a proper problem, not just like Neil said. You don't just have to run the application on the mobile just for the sake of it. Obviously, interoperability can also be provided by having a better API platform on the back end, and having all of these things work together is really important.
Yeah.
But I think we're always talking about very basic things, but very few people are very good at the basics. Yeah. And I think we're all better at the basics. We could build much better experiences on top of it. Mm. Yeah. And then we probably wouldn't talk so much about interoperability because it would always be there.
Love that. Okay, Borre, just thinking about the future, what are one or two areas that you'd like to see significant progress in when it comes to interoperability?
I guess to add to what I said earlier, I think it's really about being open. I think people should provide open capabilities on the front end. There's no reason why everybody have to build the same thing over again. People should be able to take our components, embed it in their app. We should be able to take other people's components, embed it in our apps, and then having a proper API backend that would service anyone everywhere they are, and regardless of device and regardless of situation, really.
Yeah, I like that. Johan?
I think the real thing that I want to see for the coming 6 months of the future is the collaborative tools taking part in the interoperability space. They do to some extent today, but really sort of enable users to sort of write things or talk and turn that into actionable data. So if I say buy 500 Apple to a trader, that becomes an actionable item. To my family, it becomes go to the supermarket. That I think is the sort of future. Maybe 6 months is a little bit aggressive, but that would be the future thing that I want to see, that in the collaborative chat world, we actually turn that into actionable, clickable items. That would be my...
Really cool.
So I guess I agree with both those things. To take like a slightly different dimension from my answer, like we're seeing a lot of like quants and other sort of desk strats and others building small tools, and we're now starting to see people getting interested in how the tool that they build can like work with the enterprise tools that run on the trader's desk. And the guys before were showing some other interesting related pieces. Like so I'd like to see better integration with things like Jupyter notebooks and all that other ecosystem, and interop and that sort of stuff, to get like a really enterprise apps, execution, all the big shiny things that we build, plus all the trader tooling working in that nice ecosystem all together, and start to get people off of spreadsheets and those things, and get to people wanting to participate in that sharing. And we're starting to see some of that, but there's a lot more to come.
Fantastic. Okay, and to close out, one more question that has nothing to do with interoperability. Neil, we'll start with you. Favorite current show?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough question. I haven't watched much TV for a while.
Which one?
I haven't watched much TV for a while.
Oh, or book.
Or read a book.
Borre, help us out.
That's true.
That's true.
Well,
any recommendations?
Favorite shows are usually like Winter Olympics, seeing Norway beating Sweden.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Those were the days. Yeah.
Johan, anything to offer here?
I'm still stuck on Stranger Things. I'm
okay.
Continuously rewatching it and thinking about my childhood.
All right. Well, with that, really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. We're going to be drinking and networking more over there. So thank you all, and we will see you again soon.